They call him the richest man who ever lived, not a tech billionaire, not an oil tycoon, not even a modern-day business magnate. His name is whispered through the pages of history, a name that shaped empires, stunned kings, and redefined the meaning of wealth. His name is Mansa Musa. Centuries before Wall Street, before global stock markets and oil empires, one man rose to unimaginable power and wealth in West Africa. He was not just rich, he was legendary. Historians say that if his fortune were adjusted for today's value, it would surpass even the combined wealth of some of the world's biggest billionaires. But his story is more than just gold. It's a story of empire, faith, power, and a journey that shook the medieval world to its core. Our story begins in the 14th century, in the golden sands of West Africa. Far away from Europe's castles and Asia's palaces stood a powerful kingdom, the Empire of Mali. It was here that Mansa Musa was born. At that time, Mali was one of the largest and wealthiest empires in the world, and its strength came from something more valuable than anything else: gold. The land of Mali sat on some of the richest gold mines in human history. More than half of the world's gold supply during the Middle Ages is said to have come from this region. Mansa Musa inherited a kingdom already bathed in gold, but what he did with it would change the course of history. He became the 10th Mansa, which means Emperor of Mali, in 1312, but the way he came to power is fascinating. Musa was not originally destined to be king. His predecessor had a dream to explore the Atlantic Ocean and discover what lay beyond. So he gathered a fleet of ships and sailed west, leaving Musa as his deputy. The fleet never returned, and Mansa Musa became the ruler of the Mali Empire. From that moment on, he ruled with unmatched power. Under his leadership, Mali stretched over 2,000 miles, covering modern-day Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Chad. The empire controlled key trade routes across the Sahara Desert. Salt, ivory, slaves, and especially gold passed through its lands. This control made Mali one of the richest empires the world had ever seen, and Musa sat at its heart like a golden sun. But Mansa Musa wasn't just a ruler of wealth, he was a ruler of vision. A devout Muslim, he sought to strengthen his empire's faith, culture, and knowledge. And it was this devotion that would lead to one of the most extraordinary journeys in human history, a pilgrimage that would shock the entire medieval world. In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to make the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. But this was no ordinary pilgrimage. He set out with a caravan so massive, it became the stuff of legend. Accounts say he took 60,000 men, including soldiers, officials, and slaves, along with 12,000 slaves, each carrying 4 pounds of gold bars. He brought camels, hundreds of them, each loaded with hundreds of pounds of gold dust. His entourage stretched as far as the eye could see. This was not just a religious journey. It was a statement to the world. Mali had arrived. When Mansa Musa's caravan crossed the Sahara and entered the city of Cairo, the people could hardly believe what they saw. Dressed in silk, carrying gold that glittered like the sun, Musa and his people dazzled the Egyptians. He spent gold lavishly, donating to the poor, buying goods, and showing generosity like no one had ever seen. But Musa's generosity was so vast, it created an economic shockwave. Historians say that the amount of gold he spent in Cairo caused inflation. For more than a decade, gold's value dropped, and Egypt's economy felt the impact of his visit for years. Think about that for a moment. One man, one pilgrimage was powerful enough to shift the economy of an entire region. No modern billionaire has ever managed something like that. But Musa's journey didn't just leave gold behind, it left a legacy. As he continued to Mecca, he met scholars, architects, and merchants. He brought many of them back with him to Mali, determined to make his empire a center of learning, culture, and faith. Upon his return, Mansa Musa transformed his empire. In Timbuktu, he built the University of Sankore, which became one of the greatest centers of learning in the world, long before universities like Harvard or Oxford became famous. Timbuktu was already attracting scholars, scientists, poets, and thinkers from across Africa, the Middle East, and even Europe. He built magnificent mosques, the most famous being the Jingariba Mosque, constructed with the help of architects he met on his pilgrimage. The empire flourished not just in wealth, but in knowledge. Mali became a beacon of light in an age often called the Dark Ages elsewhere in the world. Mansa Musa also developed infrastructure. He built cities, promoted trade, and created systems that allowed his empire to thrive for decades. Caravans flowed in and out of Mali carrying goods across the Sahara. Gold, salt, ivory, and slaves were exchanged for textiles, books, and other precious goods from North Africa and the Middle East. His reign also left its mark on the global map quite literally. European mapmakers, who at the time knew very little about sub-Saharan Africa, were astonished by reports of this golden empire. On the famous Catalan Atlas of 1375, Mansa Musa was depicted sitting on a golden throne, holding a golden scepter and a golden nugget, symbolizing his unmatched wealth and power. To the medieval world, he became a symbol of unimaginable riches. But how rich was Mansa Musa really? Historians estimate his wealth at the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars. Today, some say more than $400 billion. But the truth is, his fortune was so vast that it's nearly impossible to measure. It wasn't just money in a bank. He controlled gold mines, trade routes, and entire cities. His wealth wasn't stored, it was lived. It was in the streets, in the caravans, in the gold dust flowing across continents. Yet Mansa Musa was more than just a wealthy king. He was a leader who understood the power of knowledge, faith, and legacy. Unlike many rulers who hoarded their wealth, Musa invested in his people and his empire. He turned Timbuktu into a global center of learning. He spread Islam peacefully, encouraging education and culture. Mansa Musa ruled for 25 years, and under his leadership, Mali reached its peak. After his death, the empire would eventually decline, but his legacy lived on. The golden age of Mali inspired explorers, traders, and historians for centuries. Even today, his name echoes through history as a symbol of power and wealth. But perhaps what makes his story even more incredible is how little most of the world knows about him. In school, we learn about European kings, emperors, and conquerors, but the story of the richest man in history, a West African emperor, is often overlooked. And yet, his impact was global. He shaped economies, inspired maps, built cities, and left behind a legend that still stirs the imagination. Imagine a man so wealthy that his generosity shakes an entire continent. A man so powerful that medieval Europe painted his portrait on their maps. A man so visionary that his empire became a beacon of learning when much of the world was living in shadows. That was Mansa Musa. His journey reminds us that power is not just in weapons or armies, but in knowledge. He didn't just build a kingdom, he built a civilization that changed history. And perhaps the most fascinating part of his story is this: Mansa Musa didn't seek fame. His pilgrimage was an act of faith, yet it made him the most talked about man of his time. Even centuries later, we're still telling his story. Today, as modern billionaires build rockets and tech empires, Mansa Musa's story stands as a reminder that wealth is not just measured in dollars, but in impact. He changed the world without a single tweet, without a single company, just through leadership, vision, and the gold beneath his feet. His empire may have faded, but his legend has not. In every story of wealth, in every conversation about the richest people who ever lived, his name deserves to be spoken first. Mansa Musa, the emperor who turned gold into history. And if this story inspired you to look at history differently, make sure to subscribe, because the past is full of powerful stories waiting to be rediscovered.